People who have been in a coma, what was it like? Back in the 90s, my great-grandfather had a stroke. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he woke up, he had completely forgotten how to speak English. The only language he could speak was Choctaw. He had learned it as a kid because his family lived near a Choctaw reservation, and he spent a lot of time playing with the local kids. Back then, he was fluent, but as he grew older, he forgot the language entirely, hadn't spoken a single word of it for years. This went on for about 10 days. Then, one night, he woke up from a nightmare and suddenly could only speak English again, completely forgetting every word of Choctaw. The strangest part, he could perfectly recall and repeat every single conversation that had taken place in the room while he was in the coma. I was in a coma for 4 days. When I woke up, everyone around me was talking about some baby. I had lost my long-term memory and didn't even remember that I had been pregnant. My son was in the neonatal intensive care unit. I had given birth via C-section at 29 weeks. It was all related to Crohn's disease, which I only found out about after waking up. During my pregnancy, my large intestine had ruptured. My husband told me that when I first came to, I was talking like a little kid. When I woke up, I felt extremely exhausted, and for the next few days, I was still a bit out of it. I remembered hearing my mom talking to a nurse while I was unconscious, and then after a couple of days, my long-term memory slowly came back, and I remembered everything, even up to my second surgery. My son was actually born during my third surgery. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I woke up, I was still on a ventilator. When they disconnected me, my body had completely forgotten how to breathe on its own. I literally had to learn how to do it again. Yeah, it took me a few days. I had no natural sense of how long or how deep to inhale, how long to hold my breath, or how slowly to exhale. I had to focus all my attention just on breathing. It was honestly terrifying. Updated, for everyone wondering how I slept, well, I didn't for the first couple of days. Whenever I dozed off, my oxygen sensor would start beeping like crazy and wake me up. Then a nurse would start yelling across the ICU, making sure I didn't forget to breathe. I couldn't talk because I had tubes in my nose and throat, but I remember waking up exhausted to that damn beeping, so I had to refocus on my breathing, but honestly, it pissed me off. One time, a nurse rushed over and started shouting at me to breathe. I looked at her and with the most lifeless voice snapped, "Yes, I'm breathing." She must have read my lips and felt my frustration because she just threw her hands up and said, all right, good job. Then she walked away. Sharing this because I never really had a chance to before. It took me about a month to fully get my normal breathing back. Health-wise, I'm totally fine now, so I wouldn't say it had any long-term effects. My mom was in a medically induced coma for 3 months. When she woke up, she thought the hospital was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed, but collapsed onto the floor. Her legs weren't working. She was terrified because they had completely lost their shape. She had to relearn how to control every single muscle. She couldn't speak properly and had forgotten how to write. After relearning, her handwriting was completely different. She also hated how her hands looked. Her nails and cuticles were too perfect, too clean, because they hadn't been used for so long. I remember trying to brush her hair after she woke up. Most of it had fallen out. She had almost died every single day while in the coma. It all started with sepsis after a failed surgery for diverticulitis. Eventually, most of her hair grew back and she learned walk again, but her brain was damaged, and now she always looks kind of drunk when she moves. She constantly feels dizzy, but it's been 5 years now, and honestly, her recovery is nothing short of a miracle. A close family friend fell into a coma for 6 months. When he finally woke up, the first thing that shocked him was how old his wife looked. Turns out, he had lost the last 15 years of his memory. He remembered having 2 kids, but in his mind they were still babies. He didn't even know he had a 3rd child. That memory never came back. It was like he had jumped straight from a world without mobile phones to a world of smartphones and laptops, and everything felt completely new. He thought he was still in the early 90s, but in reality, he was waking up in the 2000s. He had to learn a lot, but the hardest part for him, realizing he had missed his kids growing up. This is the saddest story I've read in this thread. Oh god, that's horrifying. He must have felt like he was being punished for something terrible. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. When she woke up, she had false memories. All of them were based on conversations that had taken place in her hospital room. For example, she was convinced that we had traveled to Washington for treatment. While she was in the coma, my father had been talking about just returning from a work trip to Washington. Somehow she must have overheard it while unconscious, and her brain interpreted it as if she had gone to Washington instead. Even after we explained where she actually was, it took days for her to accept reality. My brother-in-law had a brain tumor, so he was unconscious for a while when he was first brought to the hospital. The nurses were of Asian descent, so when he woke up, he kept apologizing to everyone because he thought he had made them travel all the way to Japan just to visit him. My stepfather was in a coma for about 3 weeks. When he woke up, he couldn't find his dentures. We had completely forgotten where we put them and spent an entire week searching for them. Then, out of nowhere, he suddenly collapsed near the hospital sink. They had to resuscitate him, but no one could figure out why he was struggling to breathe. Later, the doctors sat us down and showed us his x-rays, with his dentures still inside his mouth. Turns out they had forgotten to remove them when inserting his breathing tubes, which ended up blocking his airway or something like that. So yeah, we did find them. I was in a coma for 4 days due to bacterial meningitis. When I woke up, I was completely deaf. I had to communicate with my parents and doctors using a notepad and pen. Eventually, my hearing slowly returned in my left ear, but my right ear is still 100% deaf to this day. My wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to contrast dye, and her heart stopped for 20 minutes. For almost 3 months after waking up, she talked to her long-deceased parents. She spoke about them as if they were in the next room. Sometimes she'd say her daughter or brother had called her, but they never had. She truly believed her parents were still alive. It drove me crazy having to gently correct her multiple times a day. She also made up the most incredible stories about what people, relatives, friends, neighbors were doing and saying. It was like she had this wild creative imagination. After 3 months, she slowly started coming back to reality. The confabulation stopped. Everything changed. Now she can remember recent events, but all her long-term memories are gone. I can't even imagine how that must feel, but it has to be awful. Sometimes she cries over the memories she lost, but overall she's doing really well.